Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something absolutely crucial. We're talking about a phenomenon that's happening all around us, literally every single day, yet it flies completely under the radar for most of us. We're going to take a structured, seriously eye-opening look at the hidden impact of societal labeling on children. It's like a giant puzzle, figuring out the fascinating and, honestly, sometimes heartbreaking ways kids learn to cope. We're going to map out exactly what's going down in our homes and classrooms using some incredibly insightful source material to guide us. So let's get into it. Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to take a second and just think back to your own past. Have you ever been labeled at school or work? Have you ever felt like you were just boxed into a category? Maybe it was back in high school, maybe college, or heck, maybe even last week at your workplace. Being labeled, it's a completely universal experience, right? Almost all of us have had to navigate it at some point. And when you sit back and reflect on how that actually felt, how it shaped your actions or made you second-guess yourself, you instantly realize the sheer weight a simple label can carry. And here's the real kicker. If you've dealt with this, it's highly likely that your own child is going through the exact same thing right this very minute. So where do these labels actually come from? Well, their origins are incredibly varied, but they're always deeply personal. A label might stem from physical attributes, something as simple as how a kid looks. Or it could come from their accent, or maybe how proficient they are in a certain language or a specific subject at school. Sometimes it's just tied to other behaviors they display. But the real issue here, according to our source material, isn't just that these labels are applied in the first place. It's that they persist. They stick like glue. And when a label persists over time, it actually forces a shift in the person carrying it. It goes from being just a random word they hear to a heavy reality they have to manage every single day.
Section 1, Silent Coping Mechanisms.
When children are hit with these persistent, sticky labels, they don't just brush them off and move on. Human beings are incredibly adaptive, and kids naturally develop specific behaviors to protect themselves from the vulnerability of being labeled. They basically build a shield. And this brilliantly illustrates the stark dichotomy of those coping mechanisms. We have two incredibly distinct, complete opposite reactions acting as armor for these kids. On one side, some children become overtly aggressive. Actually, scratch that. They don't just become aggressive. They get loud, they push back, they might act out just to reclaim a little sense of power or deflect the attention. But then, on the entirely opposite side of the spectrum, some children become overly quiet. They withdraw, they shrink themselves down, basically hoping to avoid being noticed or labeled any further. It's a genuinely fascinating look at the behavioral extremes kids will retreat to just to feel a little bit safe in their environment. Now, I want to slow down our pacing right here for a minute because this next point carries so much gravity. Expecting changes to resolve themselves causes immense agony. When we see our kids acting out aggressively or retreating into total silence, the easiest thing in the world is to write it off as just a phase, to think, oh, they'll just grow out of it. But our source explicitly warns against doing that. Waiting is only going to cause the child more pain. Sure, maybe a tiny fraction of kids might eventually get over it by themselves, but the vast majority absolutely cannot. Think they'll magically figure it out on their own? No way. Expecting them to just figure it out while they are actively suffering under the weight of a label, that is a literal recipe for silent agony. Section 2. Spotting these subtle signals. So if we can't just wait it out, what are we supposed to do? Well, we have to become highly observant. Kids aren't exactly going to sit you down and give you a perfectly articulated presentation on their emotional distress, right? Instead, the signs are often these easily missed red flags that require some very deliberate parental vigilance. Now, what's really interesting about this is how mundane these signals look on the surface. We are not talking about dramatic Hollywood meltdowns here. The changes are noticeable, for sure, but they are incredibly subtle. Think of these like heartbreaking little micro stories. Imagine a child who always cared deeply about looking smart and presentable, suddenly completely giving up on neatness. Or a kid who starts losing a pen every single day. Or maybe you notice a totally unexplained change in their food habits. There are plenty of these subtle signals out there, but you have to actively learn to observe them. They are quiet cries for help. Section 3. Providing the right support. Once you actually spot those signals, it's time to pivot to action. And honestly, this is the uplifting, empowering part of our explainer today. You do not have to be a helpless bystander. Parents can actively step in and give their kids exactly what they need to safely navigate these labels and shed those painful coping mechanisms. Let's move forward and see how this builds into highly practical, concrete steps. Step 1, observe the signals we just talked about. And whatever you do, do not ignore them. Step 2 is incredibly powerful. Share your own experiences. Talk to your child about the times you were labeled and how you managed to overcome it. It bridges that gap and makes them feel way less alone. But here is the brilliant caveat from our source material in step 3. Your way might not actually work for your child. And you know what? That is perfectly okay. If your strategy doesn't fit them, your job is to actively encourage and empower them to figure out a unique path that works for them. So, the crucial point is this: the source material takes a very definitive, perhaps even provocative stance on the whole issue. When children are struggling to get over these labels, what they fundamentally need is parental support and guidance, not counseling. It really emphasizes that outsourced counseling just isn't the primary answer here. What these kids need most is an observant, engaged parent stepping in to guide them through the emotional maze of their daily lives. I want to conclude our explainer today by leaving you with a really powerful question to reflect on. Will you notice the subtle signals before they become a silent agony? It's a real call to immediate action. The labels are out there and the coping mechanisms are happening right under our noses. Keep your eyes open for the lost pens, the sudden untidiness, the quiet retreats. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I really hope this structured look at childhood labeling empowers you to be the exact guide your child needs.